Our premises just aren't suitable.
You just can't carry passengers.
They wouldn't fit in with the others.
And they need a lot of time off.
The customers wouldn't like it.
What if there's a fire?
Oh, this is the old story. This is the thing every manager always says to me when I try and place someone who's in a wheelchair. And there really is no problem at all. We had a fire alarm here not very long ago, and I was amazed when I got out of the building to see that Tim was already outside.
What if there was a fire? That's just one of many doubts you might have about employing people with disabilities. As you see, in this case, the problem's been thought about and it's been coped with quite easily. Now, it's natural to have doubts and questions about employing people with disabilities. Some of the problems you might imagine may never ever present themselves. But also, once you think about any actual problems and analyse them, a solution is usually available. But what it comes down to is applying good management skills. Tim Phillips is now a clerk in the accounts department at the CEGB in Birmingham. According to Betty Sansom, managers there initially expressed a variety of doubts about taking on someone in a wheelchair.
Most people were a bit hesitant and had vague fears about what would be involved with coping with Tim in his wheelchair. But in fact, they were surprised at how little trouble it was to have someone in a wheelchair.
Of course, the vast majority of people with disabilities are not, in fact, in wheelchairs. And in this programme, we'll see a range of problems and disabilities, some more obvious than others. But questions of mobility and whether premises can be suitable for people in wheelchairs are among the important doubts felt by employers and supervisors. Beverly Elvaranga is a receptionist. Her supervisor is Janet Palmer.
I was concerned about the amount of work that the receptionist could cope with if she was disabled, and the mobility of the person, and also whether the staff would have to adjust to see that everything was all right for her, as we hadn't had a disabled person on the premises before, and also whether her disability would cause extra days off for sick leave and punctuality problems. We applied for government grant, and that enabled us to spend some money on the adaptations to the building that were required. Beverly's wheelchair is a narrow one, and so we didn't have to adjust all the building. The doors were wide enough for that, which was fine. But the toilet facilities obviously had to be altered. And we built ramps at the front door and the back, which he's able to cope with very well. I didn't know anything at all about disabled people being employed. I had always been very apprehensive personally. Within a couple of days of Beverly's arrival, most of my fears had disappeared, and any problems that she did have, we just talked about and worked around, really.
We were impressed by her personality, by the fact that she could do all the tasks, the tests that we set her. Those fears, in essence, were diminished by her very presence.
Yes, can I ask you what it's about?
It's about the rent.
Right, just a second.
Tony Lees assembles electronic components. Till recently, he was a sheet metal worker. His production manager had to make a number of changes in the factory for Tony.
Tony was paraplegic when he came to the company. He was interviewed in his wheelchair, but it was his skills that we were after as a sheet metal worker. Because Tony was confined to a wheelchair, the normal height of the machines, etc., drills, was difficult for Tony to reach. So a number of drills and machines had to be adapted. Drills had to be lowered so that Tony could see the workpiece at the correct level. And obviously some machines that were foot operated had to be converted to hand operated. Quite recently, Tony was provided with a Levo wheelchair, This is a wheelchair that allows Tony to go into a standing position by sort of electrically lifting him up. And of course, once Tony was in a standing position, then it was a different ball game, because of course the machines then could be taken up to a standard height.
As you see, adaptations can be made, often simply and inexpensively. Government assistance, if it's needed, is available. But what about productivity? Schedules, targets and budgets all need to be met. Can a person with a disability be as productive as other workers? The case of Miles' buggy shows how much help can be available both in funding and advice, and just how successful the results can be in terms of productivity. Miles trained at Oldham General Hospital for 6 years when he developed multiple sclerosis.
He was working in microbiology department, which in fact is working with potential dangerous pathogens. So with Miles' disability of shaking and other physical problems that he had, he was actually a danger to himself and to the other members of staff.
Miles obviously felt that, you know, he had a good brain, he'd qualified, and he had a lot to offer. But unfortunately, that department, he just couldn't function properly. At first, it was very difficult. One always has to stop this talking behind doors. It wasn't anything wrong. You see, he had an illness, and it had to be discussed openly. And by doing that, we could offer help.
Miles' problem was resolved by a move to the haematology department, where his work would not involve handling dangerous specimens, and also with some very special equipment.
Miles had 2 physical problems. One was the problem of his head shaking, which made it very, very difficult for him to look down a microscope. And secondly, he had a handshake, which meant that he had awful problems using the fine adjustments on the microscope. The problem with the head shaking and the eyepieces was overcome by the use of a video camera attached to the microscope, projecting onto a small television screen. The little joysticks which he uses rule out the shaking of the hand when it comes in.
Even with the new technology that's available to Miles, did you still have any doubts about his capabilities?
We're a team in haematology. Everyone has their part to play, and if one person is slacking, the whole system grinds to a halt. So that the section we were giving him was a very important section, and I felt, well, if he falls down there, everything is going to come to a halt, and we're not going to get the work out.
In the event, what happened?
Everything has worked out really well. With the equipment that he's got, there is no reason at all for him not to get his work out. Mentally, he's very, very acute, and he has a lot to offer our department now.
He now is training other students, and he's really sort of lapped it up, for the want of a better word. He's an awful lot better.
Mandy Maddock is blind, yet she works helping other people with disabilities to find jobs. Her manager is Gina Coulson.
I think initially we thought that there would be a lot of problems when Mandy came to work here. We had a lot of negative feelings. Things like, how would she actually find the building? How would she actually get up and down the stairs? How would she make herself a cup of tea? How would she go to the toilet? Lots and lots of problems that we actually thought of initially.
Well, for a start, I'd say to any employer that's the last thing you want to worry about, because the blind person will find his or her own way to the food, to the toilets and home from work. And those are the 3 main priorities.
A major question was Mandy's ability to cope with the paperwork in her job.
I think initially we thought there would be a lot of problems with paperwork, but we weren't aware of the equipment that Mandy could have as a blind person. She actually has a reader to help her with all the clerical work, and she also has some machines that she uses to help her sort out her paperwork as well. So really, in effect, that's not as much a problem as we thought it would be.
Mandy's personal reader, paid for through the Disablement Advisory Service, reads documents to her and keeps her up to date with paperwork. Mandy also has a Versabraille machine with which she can keep her own diary and prepare reports. These are then printed out on a normal typewriter.
She more than pulls her weight. I think now what we've got to concentrate on is Mandy's capabilities. She has capabilities that other people haven't got. So there are certain things that she would shine at that other people wouldn't. And we concentrate on her capabilities. And in that respect, she pulls her weight equally in the organisation.
Martin Neelan designs high-quality furniture. After the loss of his right arm in a motorcycle accident, he retrained himself to draw with his left hand. He's now employed by Mike Crane.
We perceive there might be a couple of problems employing Martin. The first one was really to do not with his talent or his imagination, was actually to do with his work rate.
To that point in time, I was using a parallel action drawing board. It meant basically that you had 2 or 3 separate components which you had to hold on to the drawing board and use in conjunction with each other. What I needed was an engineering type of square where it took a lot of the mechanism out of it for you.
Again, through the Disablement Advisory Service, Martin was provided with the equipment he needed.
As well as the engineering head, I also had to be very specific on the stand because the stand needed adjustment in height and also in angle. And I had to have a chair to suit so that the chair would adjust to the various heights which I had to work at. It's had a dramatic effect on my drawing. It's improved the quality slightly, and more importantly, it's improved my speed in drawing, which means I can compete more.
In percentage terms, I would say it's made him almost 50% faster.
One final example of productivity, this time from the production line. Roy Carr is mentally handicapped and works at Mother Hubbard's bakery.
Oh, he's superb. He's, I think we'd say he's one of the best workers we've got. He's here every day, on time, every day. I think we had the normal fears that employers would have about whether he'd turn up on time, whether he'd fit in with the team. A scheme was available, government-sponsored scheme, and we took advantage of this, so a trial period, and that helped us really to overcome those doubts.
Roy's a very steady, reliable worker. If I had 6 people like Roy on the same line, I wouldn't have any problems at all.
So, workers with disabilities can be just as productive as their colleagues, if not more so. But employers also sometimes worry that people with disabilities will be off sick or unable to meet pension and health scheme requirements.
Some people ask us whether disabled staff actually have more sickness, more time off for sickness. This we have not found in our experience to be the case at all. There are no problems as far as the disabled staff in connection with pension schemes, sickness entitlement. All staff are treated in exactly the same way. They all have the same entitlements.
Martin Peach and Roger Taylor work for Marks and Spencer. Both Martin and Roger had some learning difficulties, and Roger also has epilepsy.
We don't consider his epilepsy to be any problem at all. He is a controlled epileptic. As with a customer or any of our other members of staff, we would deal with an epileptic fit by calling on a first aider.
Some employers have doubts about their disabled employees meeting the public. Martin and Roger are involved with customers every day in the course of their jobs.
We have perhaps taken a little bit more time initially when we have been teaching them how to do the job. We have asked our supervisors perhaps to just bear in mind that they will perhaps take a little bit more time getting used to the job.
When Martin and Roger first started, we had a few problems in as much when the alarm used to ring on the carry-to-car door, they would turn the alarm off but forget to answer the door. So we had to explain to them that if they push the button to stop the alarm, they must then follow it through and go and answer the doorbell to let the customer in or just to see who was there. It was quite an easy problem to solve, and there isn't any problem anymore.
Following Martin Neelan's accident, the employer he worked for at the time took him back, but Martin soon found that he was no longer meeting customers.
When I asked about this, they said it was a decision which was made by management in my absence. No reason for that was given to me. I got the impression that they were partially embarrassed at the position and partially conscious of the company image, i.e. what would the client's reaction be to my disability. I felt confident myself that I could handle the business, but they weren't prepared to take the risk.
Martin's present employer at first thought he might need to phone clients in advance and prepare them for Martin's disability.
In practice, Martin's more than capable of dealing with any situation that might arise from a client's embarrassment, and it's become unnecessary to make a phone call.
I don't find it difficult at all dealing with customers here. I find that you've got to build up a very positive relationship with them, and I find, if anything, it helps to break down barriers.
Barriers can exist even with colleagues. Perhaps one of the most difficult disabilities to deal with in this respect is deafness. Jack Scotney works at LTE. He's now trying out a new device which uses vibrations to alert him to sounds. This should make the factory safer for him and allow his supervisor and co-workers to attract his attention more easily. In the meantime, the company are continuing to cope with other aspects of the problem, just as they always have done, by applying normal management skills.
With Jack's deafness, it tends to lead him that he's a little bit isolated at times. When he has a coffee break, he may take his coffee break stood on his own, and where other people would tend to get talking to each other, you don't tend to notice that. People then say, he stood there doing nothing. He's not working, and we sometimes get that, and I then try to point out that he can't go to anyone during his rest period and his coffee break and have a discussion because he can't converse very well with them, and it is his rest break at that time that he is taking. And I try to put it over in that respect, that you've got to accept that.
Problems may not all vanish overnight, but they can be tackled, and most of them can be solved.
We empty that bin, please, Jack. Then come and see me after. I want you to do another job.
We've now seen some real-life problems and how they've been solved in different workplaces and occupations. Finally, though, why bother at all? Why do employers and supervisors take on people with disabilities?
You lose an awful lot of very good prospective employees if you don't.
Why not? Mandy does her job very well. She's quite capable of doing the full range of duties in her job, and there's absolutely no reason why she shouldn't undertake the job that she does at the moment.
We don't really see Tony's disability at all. Because Tony's worked with us for such a length of time, we tend not to see his disability. We see his ability, but not his disability.
We certainly don't go out of our way to promote our image. We're not in that sort of ball game. But it does have a spin-off with the rest of the staff, because if they see us caring for people with a disability, they will assume that they will get the same sort of treatment should they be unfortunate in their lifetime.
I'd say forget about all the doubts and fears. You find that they don't really exist anyway, and take advantage of the government schemes that are available for a trial period.
We found it very easy to organise visits from the agencies concerned with the disabled, and encouraging us to take on a disabled person and to get our dwelling adapted. And we were a little ashamed as a housing association. We didn't do it when we built the office 5 years ago, but now we know better. And we would obviously encourage other housing associations, public bodies, local authorities, and private sector employers to please look at this problem. The money is there. The legislation is there. If the will is there, then it can be done.
If the will is there, it can be done. And if you need extra help with information, technical advice or financial support, call in your local Disablement Advisory Service.